What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with my college basketball Week 11 Top 25. Before we get into it, hit the subscribe button to be entered into our giveaway. Dropping from this week's rankings, 4 teams: James Madison, Texas, San Diego State, and Gonzaga. All 4 of these teams are falling out after some losses last week. And the only team that stays in the others receiving votes is San Diego State, as they're still knocking on the door. But this is where you get some good teams. I think Dayton is the 26th best team right now. I could have put them in. I just didn't want to take a few teams out. Texas Tech has earned themselves back up here after some good wins. And then Seton Hall is really starting to string it together in Big East play. And then the team that no one's really talking about is Grand Canyon. They're having a great season so far. 25 through 21. Colorado State, they had 1 loss last week, their only game, and I'm dropping them 10 spots here. They're 1-2 now in the Mountain West, which is kind of concerning, but they still are hanging on by a thread to that 25 ranking. Nevada, a win and a loss last week as they lost to Boise State as well. And, 2 losses this year. I couldn't knock them out, so they're here at 24. Ole Miss jumps up 2 spots with their 2 wins over Florida and Vanderbilt, and they get to go on the road and face Auburn, which should be a good game. Iowa State, now they had a great week last week, beating Houston by 4 at home, and they're undefeated at the Dunk at home this year. And now they go on the road to face 2 tough teams in the Big 12 in BYU and TCU, who are both ranked. And then Florida Atlantic, FAU, 2 wins, 2 bounce-back wins after a rough patch that they just endured at the beginning of this month in January. But they get Wichita State and then UTSA on the road, looking to get to 15-4 and get back on top of the American Conference. 20 through 16, you have 3 teams that weren't ranked last week in Creighton, TCU, and Utah State. And then you have BYU dropping 2 spots, along with Oklahoma dropping as well. But we'll talk about Creighton. 2 wins last week at DePaul, and then a squeaker against St. John's. And this week, they get UConn on the road and at Seton Hall, and this team could find themselves right back out of the top 25 with 2 losses there, because both these teams have been playing really well. BYU, that loss at Baylor wasn't a bad loss, but they just didn't look ready to play. And then they go and beat UCF, who just beat Kansas, which I thought was a good win for them, so they're only moving back 2 spots. TCU, they looked excellent last week and beating Oklahoma by 9, Houston by 1. This team just showed up and they did what they had to do, and that's why they're earning a huge ranking here. And they have Iowa State at home, which should be a good game. And if they get that win, they might be a top 15 team next week. Utah State, now they are just been blowing through teams here, and I guess their toughest game was at UNLV, winning by 1 point. And they obviously took care of business against Wyoming. This week at New Mexico, I think that is a big upset alert game for me. New Mexico has been playing well. They're good at home. And then Fresno State can be sneaky good at times, but I think that game at home for Utah State, they're going to walk away with a win. So at worst, I can see this team going 1-1 this week. Oklahoma at 16, tough week for them, losing at TCU and then losing on the road to Kansas by 12. They weren't really in it late in both of these games, and that's cause for concern. But they can bounce back this week with 2 lower tier teams in the Big 12. 15 through 11, the 13, 14, and 15 are all moving down, where 12 and 11 are making huge jumps up the rankings. Illinois, Marquette, and Arizona all had 1 loss last week, with Illinois being the only team that played 2 games and getting a win. Illinois has, I think, an easier schedule out of these 2 teams this week at Michigan. They just beat Ohio State today. Should be a decent game there. Marquette at St. John's, that'll be a tough game for them. And I think Arizona gets back to business. USC and UCLA especially, is really bad this year. So Arizona should take care of business there. But we'll talk about the good teams jumping up. Auburn and Wisconsin. Auburn, 2 wins at home, defeating both teams by 10 points or more. Wisconsin almost did the same thing, but they only beat Northwestern by 8. And they each have a home and away game this week. And Auburn, I think, is that team that's going to be sneaky come tournament time. I think they're going to fall into a rut maybe in November in February, right before the tournament. I think both these teams could slip a little bit, but I like the trajectory that they are going right now, and these teams could be, a dark horse to possibly win it all when it's all said and done. 10 through 6, you get some movement here. Baylor jumping into the top 10 along with Memphis at 10 and 9. Kentucky drops 2 spots after their loss in OT at Texas A&M. Duke moves up 2 after they've won, I think, 6 straight now. And then Tennessee falls back after their loss at Mississippi State. But Baylor, they're starting to put it all together again after a few rough losses. 2 losses they had. They're starting to figure that back out, and obviously now they're back in the top 10. Memphis is a team that finds ways to win games, that win in OT against UTSA at home. Shows me that this team can hang in the end game and really put it together when they need to. And then their next performance on the road at Wichita State just came out and blew the doors off them. For Kentucky at 8, that win against Missouri was a good win, but then losing on the road at Texas A&M, which a lot of people pretty much saw coming and being an upset. But they get to rebound this week with hopefully 2 easier games. Duke gets Pittsburgh yet again, except at home this week, and only 1 game they have this week, so should beat them after destroying them by 22 last week. And then Tennessee, I think that Alabama game could be a big question mark. Bama's been playing pretty good right now, and if they win that, more than likely Bama might be at least in my others receiving votes. But Tennessee, they really figured it out late against Georgia. It was a close game, but they found a way to win that one after kind of blowing the Mississippi State game and not really getting a chance to win that game. Then 5 through 1, North Carolina cracks the top 5 for the first time in a while after 2 dominating wins. The one especially against Syracuse, beating them by 30 through 6 points. That is, they get 2 easier games in the ACC and a down year for the ACC. So North Carolina should cruise. Houston drops 3 spots from 1 to 4, and they had 2 losses last week. Their first 2 losses come in conference play at Iowa State and at TCU, who now you see are both ranked. So they've had some good wins. Texas Tech is very close. They could be ranked next week if they beat Houston, and then UCF has already upset Kansas. So Houston, has some trouble games here coming up, and are they ready for the Big 12? Kansas, however, been in the Big 12 for a while, suffered a loss to a newcomer in UCF last week, but they responded with a win at home against Oklahoma, so I'm keeping them where they are at 3. They get 2 road games this week against lower tier Big 12 opponents, should win in those. Purdue at 2, they lost on the road at Nebraska and then responded in a big way with a big win against Penn State. They also get 2 road games, and that game at Indiana, I think, is a trap game for them. They always play tough, close games in the rivalry, in the Purdue-Indiana rivalry, so make sure you don't miss that game. And then at 1, you get UConn. This team, I think, has won, 8 or 9 straight, and they kept it going with 2 wins. The Xavier game was a good win for them on the road because Xavier will be a top team in the Big East when it's all said and done. But this week, I think we can tell a lot about UConn. Creighton at home. Creighton's hot right now. They're looking to climb up the leaderboard. And then at Villanova. Villanova's a team that could be sneaky because they just have good coaching and they have some good players that I don't think are getting talked about enough. But it's going to be tough for UConn to go in there and get a win. But I expect it to happen. But crazier things have happened so far in this college basketball season. And that's going to be it for the rankings this week. Check back next week to see if your favorite team is ranked and if UConn can stay at number 1. But until next time, the Bench Buddies are out.